Thank you for joining me here at CodeRage for a FireUI deep dive session. My name is Sarina DuPont and I'm a Senior Product Manager here at Embarcadero Technologies. Now, during today's CodeRage session, I'm going to show you how to use the FireUI Multi-Device Designer tips and tricks for developing multi-device applications, the MultiView menu component, how to work with FireMonkey styles, and also how to create your own custom styles using the Bitmap style designer. And last, we're going to see a demo from Jim McKeith on the FireUI Live Preview functionality. So what is FireUI? FireUI is our collection of technologies that allow you to quickly create an application for multiple devices, target platforms, and form factors. It allows you to create a shared user interface across all devices and form factors, and then you can customize your user interface as needed by creating views. It consists of a form designer, the MultiView menu component, and also our behavior services. And you'll find out more about that as the presentation goes on. In addition to the FireUI Multi-Device Designer, we also have the Multi-Device Preview and App Preview on Device functionality, and this is a feature that we added in Berlin that allows you to see visually on each target platform the changes that you're making in the IDE at design time. So this is a really great prototyping feature, and we'll show you a demo of that later on. Now, FireMonkey provides the option for either rendering the controls using GPU-driven rendering, and in that case you're able to leverage all the different styles that we provide, the platform styles as well as custom styling, or using the platform native rendering, which allows you to render the controls using the operating system, and that is a feature that's supported for select controls on both iOS and Windows today. And with that, let's get started with some demos. Now, when you get started building your first multi-device application and you go to File, New, Multi-Device Application, either Delphi or C++ Builder, if you're using Rad Studio 10.1 Berlin, you're presented with the master. And on the master, you can select from a Windows style, an OS X style, an iOS style, and an Android style. So I'm going to change this to the iOS style. If you're looking to build your application and have the same exact layout for all target platforms and all target devices, then you can just work here on the master. So I'm going to put down a toolbar and a label, and I'm going to client align my label. Then I'm going to go to Style Lookup and select Tool Label. This will ensure that the proper styling is applied across all the platforms, so that on iOS it selects the proper font at runtime with a bold font for the titling, and on Android it selects the Roboto font, and so on and so forth. So if I go and scroll down here, I can then go to Text Settings, and I can select Horizontal Alignment to Center. So I client aligned the label and selected Horizontal Alignment Center. And now you can, for example, change this to Application Title. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tab control. I'm also going to client align this. And then I'm going to right-click on my tab and add a couple tab items. And as you can see here, by default, with the iOS style selected, the tab control and tab items, the tab items are aligned to the bottom. And this is the default behavior that you would expect on an iOS application. So if you're looking at many of the applications, if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you'll see that tabs are generally on the bottom. They also generally use an icon, whereas on Android, they're generally displayed at the top. So if I switch style to Android, you'll now see them displayed at the top. And this is done using the behavior services that we have built into FireMonkey. You can manually overwrite this if you want, but using the behavior services, you're able to leverage the built-in functionality that ensures that you're adhering to the platform guidelines. So I'm going to select tab item 1, and I can go to Style Lookup here, and I can now select from many different predefined icons. You could also, if you wanted to, you could also load your own custom icon. And this supports multiple resolutions. So you could, for example, load any of 1x, 1.5x, 2x, and 3x icon that would ensure that your graphic looks nice across all the different target platforms. So in this case, I'm just using the default ones. And you'll see now if I switch this back to Android, at the top here, I don't see the icons because traditionally on Android, you don't have tab items with icons. So now if you wanted to have all your application UI be the same across all the target platforms, then all you'd have to do is just to finish building it and you'd be ready to go. Now, what if you wanted to have a different UI or some differences between iOS and Android? Now, if you select the master here, you can see all the different available devices. And these are views that allow you to fully customize your user interface in the FireUI Multi-Device Designer. So as I mentioned in the presentation earlier during the slides, you don't need to create a view for every device, but you should create at least one for each target platform if you want to have any UI differences or want to have any code changes in your application that are specific to a particular target platform. So for example, let's say you want to have different behavior on iOS than Android. All you'd have to do is select a single iOS view. So for example, iPhone 4.7, that's equivalent to the iPhone 6 or iPhone 7. And then you could make changes on this view. So for example, now I'm on tab item 1. I'm going to add a label. And I'm going to change the text here just to make it easier to identify. iPhone 4.7 inch. Okay, so this is my iPhone 6 device. Now, if I go back to the master, you will see that on the master, it still says label 2. So the way that this works is any changes that you're making on the master itself are propagated and streamed down to the views. Any changes you're making on the view itself are particular to that view. So for example, if I just have an iPhone 4.7 inch device here or view, then anytime I'm running this application on an iOS target device, so any iPhone or any supported iPad, it would show the UI that I'm showing here if I have a single platform view. So right now I have a single iPhone view, which means that at runtime, it would use this as the guideline for iOS. The same is true if I create a single Android view. So what that means is any changes I make that I want to have only executed on Android, any UI changes, any code changes, it would be sufficient to just make them on a single view. Again, that's assuming that the UI would be the same across all the target platforms, across your target platform and all the devices within Android. So you can see now, if I go back here to Android 5 inch and I change this text label to Android 5 inch, you will see that if I go back to the master, it still says label 2. And this is because I did not make the change on the master itself. If you're making a change on the master, that's actually streamed into each of the views. However, if you're making a change on the view, then any further changes you're making on the master will not affect the changes you made on the view. So for example, if I change this label 2 here to say master, and then go to my iPhone 4.7 view, you'll see that it does not say master, but instead says iPhone 4.7. If I go to Android 5 inch, it says Android 5 inch. And that's because this is view specific. Now, if you wanted to have a tablet UI and a phone UI, and you wanted to have distinct differences between the two, then you should select at least one phone form factor and one tablet form factor for your target platform. So for example, if I wanted to have support iOS with both an iPhone view and a tablet view, then I would create an iPhone device layout or view, and I would create an iPad view. And then on the iPad, for example, I could add additional UI elements, etc. Now, generally speaking, what I would recommend you do is you go back to the master, you lay out your entire application with as many common elements as you ultimately want to have, including elements that you would hide on a phone form factor because you have less screen real estate. Put all your application logic on the master, all the UI elements on the master, and then go into each of the views and hide the UI elements that you don't want to show, because that will save you a lot of time ultimately. For example, if you wanted to have a phone form factor for iOS and Android, and you wanted to have that UI look distinct on a phone versus a tablet, but have everything else be the same, it would still make sense to make those changes on the master before you actually create each of the views. Because as you saw, any changes you make on a view are specific to that view. So if you want to do a lot of customizations, then it might make sense to make all those changes on the view. But for most applications, it makes most sense to lay out at least the majority of the application on the master and then create your specific views and make the changes there as needed. So for example, if you wanted to have an iOS view and a different UI for iPhone and iPad, you would create an iPad view and at least one iPhone view. At runtime, it's going to determine which view to show based on which one is the closest matching based on your device and resolution. And you can also create your own custom views for devices that are not represented here. Generally speaking, the devices represented here should be sufficient for most applications today and most form factors today, but there are specific layouts that you might want to support, and maybe you want to do some UI tweaking based on specific phone form factors that are not represented here. You can actually create your own custom views and then install them into the IDE, and they will show up right here in the drop-down menu. And we have some great blog posts and instructions on how to do that. Now, a common UI element that many applications use today is a slide and drawer or a pop-up menu or a docked panel. And for that, we've created a control called the MultiView Control, Team MultiView. And this control also leverages the behavior services support that we have built into FireMonkey. The same behavior services that we have with the tab control that determines whether the tabs are shown at the bottom or top, for example, depending on the target platform. And just like with the tab control, you can go to your tab position, you can select platform default, which in that case, it will actually leverage the built-in behavior services that are part of FireMonkey to determine whether it's being run on an iPhone or an Android device, and then either display the tabs at the bottom or the top. The same also is built into the Team MultiView Control, and we have a demo here that's part of 10.1 Berlin that you can have a look at. And you'll see the Team MultiView also has a platform behavior mode. When that is selected, it has built-in modes and built-in behavior depending on target device and platform and orientation. So for example, if you have platform behavior selected here and are running this on an iOS device, and I'll just create an iPhone view. Create an iPhone view here, you'll see that this is intended to be shown as a slide-in drawer. So you have the drawer icon here, and this will then be shown as a slide-in drawer. If I rotate this device, it will still be shown as a slide-in drawer because I'm on a phone form factor. If I select an iPad, for example, it will be shown as a slide-in drawer or a pop-over in portrait mode. But if I rotate my device and it's shown in landscape mode, then this will be displayed as a docked panel. And this is part of the behavior services and the functionality that we've built into the MultiView Control. The MultiView Control has a property called Master Button, and that is the UI element that you want to use to invoke the slide and drawer or the docked panel. So for example, you can select a speed button, and then you can link it here via the master button property. If you wanted to have the same behavior across all your target platforms, regardless of orientation or form factors, so for example, regardless of whether the application is running in portrait or landscape mode, or it's running on a phone or a tablet, you could select mode here, and you could select drawer, for example, or custom and create your own custom settings. For each of the modes, there are also predefined properties that you can customize. For example, for the docked panel, you can select the split view appearance, you can select shadow options, etc. So it's a very customizable control. Now, of course, with FireUI and the Multi-Device Designer, you can also work with custom styling. And the way that's done is you can drag and drop a stylebook control onto your form, and the first thing you want to do to be able to use the stylets that will ultimately load into the stylebook is go to the form, and then in the object inspector, select your stylebook. And then all you have to do is double click and select open and load one of the styles. So in this case, I'm going to select the Windows 10 Modern Blue style. And you can see here in the structure pane, this is the actual structure of that style. And the integrated style designer makes it easy to quickly make some changes to an existing style. For example, if you wanted to change the background color, etc. And you can see the hierarchy of each of the style elements here. So I'm going to close it. This allows me to apply the style. And this is a Windows 10 style. So you can see right here, I have my Windows 10 style. And it's really easy to apply the style for each style book. And then you can actually select style collection, and you can set the name of the platform. So for example, Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. And then you can load each style for each platform so that at runtime, it will automatically load the appropriate custom style. And that's only if you want to work with custom styles instead of the built-in platform styles. I'm going to delete the style book. By default, we have built-in styles as part of each of the target platforms. So at runtime, you'll see the OS 10 style. At design time, you'll also see the styling here. And the same is also true for iOS and Android. Each of the styles has the built-in style elements that you can select from. And so, for example, here, if I select my tab item and go down to the style book, I can select from many different UI elements. And these are part of the style. And in a little while, I'm going to show you a demo of how you can create a custom style using the Bitmap Style Designer, which is the same tool that we use internally to build all of our UI styles. So that will be a great example, and you'll see actually the process of creating that style and then how to have the style element actually appear in the Style Lookup drop-down menu. And next, I'm going to show you a demo of how to create your own custom style for T-Switch using the Bitmap Style Designer. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to create a custom style for my Windows application for the T-Switch control. So if I drag and drop T-Switch onto my form here, you can see that if I select the Style Lookup menu, I have a single style option. And what I want to do now is apply a modern Windows 10 style to this control and then customize that style. So to get started, I'm going to go to Tools, Bitmap Style Designer. And this brings up the Bitmap Style Designer. And this is the tool that we also use to create all of our styles, the default styles and the premium styles. And so I thought today I'd walk you through the steps of creating your own custom style. So the way the Bitmap Style Designer is designed is you'll see here that we have kind of a blank form or a getting started point with a style PNG. And we have a lot of templates that you can choose from. So in this case, we're going to choose File New. Click right here, and we're going to select a new Windows Modern style. And this gives us a Windows 10 style template. So now if I expand the images node here, you'll see we have style, which is the 1x style. This is also the style that's used at design time, 1.5x, 2x, and 3x. Now, we provide 3x to account for high-resolution devices. This is something you don't necessarily need to do for Windows application and when you're creating a custom style, but it's recommended. So what you can see here is I have the different styles. So now what I want to do, I want to go in and actually customize the style for T-Switch. Here you can see the style elements that are part of the switch control. So this is a round shape. This is in the Windows 10 style. And I want to replace that with my own custom style. Now I'm going to move over to Photoshop, and I'm going to show you how I created the style elements for the switch control style. Now, you don't need to use Photoshop. You can also use another image editing program, but my goal today was to show you and give you a better understanding of how to lay out the style elements that you will ultimately use to create a custom style for either all of your controls or some of the controls in your application. So here's a layout that I have created. You can see this is the switch frame. This is the fill, and then we have the thumb that is activated as you're sliding the switch control. So we need our graphic in 4 different resolutions, 1x, 1.5x, 2x, and 3x, and we also have to follow those naming conventions. So what I have here is, you can see I have a transparent PNG, and this is the layout I've created for my switch. The way that I did this is I just did File, New, in Photoshop, and you select your pixels. So in this case, I've set it to 180 pixels by 120 pixels. I've zoomed in, so it's easier to do the layout. And then I've just used the rectangle tool to draw a shape. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool here, and in this case I'm going to deselect the fill color and just do a stroke outline. So this is my rectangular shape, and then I can just right click and select duplicate layer. And this below here is going to be, I'm going to move this down. This is going to be the filled shape, the filled frame. And now what I'm going to do is go back to my control here, and I'm going to select a fill color. And I'm going to deselect the stroke. So this is a good example of the frame and the fill colors. You can see this matches what I did right here. And then we want to create the thumb. So one of the things you could do, of course, as well, is you could select your original rectangle. You could select, right click it, and select duplicate layer. Then you select it and move it over, and then now you could resize it. And that ensures that it has the proper height. And now you can fill this. Again, you go back to the rectangle. I'm going to change the fill color, let's say to blue. The stroke, I don't want to show a stroke on the thumb graphic, and then I can right click this again, and I could go ahead and select duplicate layer. Use the move tool, and I can go move down the shape. And I can go and select a rectangle again, and I'm going to change this to a different fill color. You don't need to start out with a 180 by 120 pixel graphic. That's really up to you. Ultimately, what you want to do is you want to start out with a shape that's large enough that when you are done saving this out as the 3x graphic, and you should follow the same naming convention. So I have switch 30x, and then you should do switch 20x for 2x, switch 15x for 1.5x, and switch .png. There's no number for the 1x. Because the actual Bitmap Style Designer looks at the naming convention of the PNGs that you're adding to determine the resolution of those graphics. So it's really important that you're following the same naming convention. So then if you wanted to resize this, you could go to image size, and you could select 50%, for example, to go from 3x to 1.5x. And then you would go back and go to File, Save As, and you would save this out as your PNG. For example, my switch 1.15x.png. Okay, so now let's go back to the Bitmap Style Designer. So right here, I'm going to select Images, I'm going to select Add, and I'm going to browse to my folder where I have my switch graphics. So this is switch.png, this is my switch 1x size. And I'm going to go to switch 15x. So now I'm going to add my 2x resolution switch control graphic. And then I'm going to add my 3x resolution graphics. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the objects tree. And then right over here, I'm going to select to add a new switch element. Okay, so here it is, and you can see it has a frame and a thumb. So I'm going to select style object 1_switch. And I'm going to rename this to a new name. And the new name is what you will ultimately see when you have the style loaded and applied to your application in the style lookup drop-down menu. So this name here is what you will see in the style lookup drop-down. So I'm going to say my custom switch CodeRage. Okay. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select frame, and I'm going to select bitmap. Going to go to 1x right here, and you can zoom in because you want to map out this control, so it makes it a lot easier if you're able to zoom in. And so for frame, I just want this graphic right here. The purple color is actually to indicate the transparency. So I'm going to click up here, and then I'm going to control click down here and hit apply. And for pressed, I'm going to select the green color, which is the fill color for my switch control, and then control click right here. And you just want to outline the graphic. Select apply. And then I'm going to right click onto the new switch control and select automatically adjust object for all graphic resolutions. So what that means is, as you saw, I just mapped out the frame control, mapped it to the frame and the fill color, and I only did that for the 1x resolution. So in order not to have to manually go through and actually do that for all the resolutions, all I had to do is select automatically adjust objects, and you'll see that this has added the other style objects. So this has added a frame for 1.5x. This has added a frame for 2x and for 3x. And if I go and select Bitmap for 3x, for example, you can see that this is already mapped to my graphic. Now we want to do the same for the thumb. So for the thumb, we're going to select Bitmap. And we're going back to 1x. Click and then Control click. Hit Apply. And we're going to select Bitmap pressed. 1x. And we're going to select it. And then Control click. And hit Apply. And again, we want to apply and propagate those changes to 1.5x, 2x, and 3x. So we're going to go up here and select Automatically Adjust Object for all graphic resolutions. So that applies all the changes across all the graphics. And then you can also right-click here and select Test Object Style. And you can test that for all the resolutions. So you can right-click here and select Test Object Style with 2x resolution, and then you're able to test the 2x resolution. So now I'm going to save my style. And then I'm going to actually save it out. So first I just saved my style template, and I'm going to save out my style as a FireMonkey style. So you want to select .style from the drop-down menu and hit save. And I'm going to close the Bitmap Style Designer. So now I'm going to drop a style book onto my form. I'm going to load my custom style. I'm going to browse to the location right here. We have the style CodeRage.style. That's the style that we just created. I'm going to close this and apply the style to the style book. Then on the form, I'm going to activate and select the style book. Now you can see it has the Windows 10 style. And if I select T-Switch and I go to the style lookup, you can see now I have my custom switch. This is my CodeRage custom switch style element. And if I resize the Object Inspector pane here, you can see that the style element has the exact name that I assigned earlier via the Bitmap Style Designer. So let's hit Run, and we can have a look at the style. Now you can see that this control currently has a fixed size. So what if I want to resize the control and make it resizable? I can go back to Tools, Bitmap Style Designer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to load my style template. Going back to my location right here, the .vsf file, that's my style template. Then I'm going to expand the Objects node. And under the Objects node, I'm going to browse to my custom switch underscore CodeRage, select a frame, and I'm going to set margins. So I'm going to set 2 here for margin bottom, left, right, and top. And I'm going to do the same for the thumb. And by setting margins, we're enabling the ability to resize the control. So after setting that, I'm going to right-click and select Automatically Adjust Object for all graphic resolutions. And then if you have a look here, for example, it automatically sets the proper margins for 1.5x, for 2x, etc. And I'm going to hit Save. And I'm going to save this out as a style file again. So for example, CodeRage, style CodeRage 2. And then I'm going to load the style. Double click on the style book. Select the style. Close the style editor. And then you can see here now I can go in and actually resize the control. So this gives you the extra flexibility if you want to have a style that has a resizable switch control. The Bitmap Style Designer has many predefined platform-specific templates that you can use and customize to your liking. So for example, I can select New Android L Light Style, and if I select Images and expand the Images node here, you'll see that I have 4 style graphics: my 1x graphic, my 1.5x, my 2x, and my 3x graphic, and I have an accompanying anti-indicator graphic for each of the 4 resolutions. Now, if I wanted to change the color scheme from green, so from a green accent, for example, to a red accent, all I'd have to do is select Export, select the destination folder, select that folder, and hit Export. This is now going to export all of these graphics into my CodeRage test folder. And if I browse to my CodeRage test folder, you can see that I have all 8 graphics here. And what I can do is I can go back over to Photoshop. And then in Photoshop, I can open up my graphic and I can go to Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. And I can quickly adjust these values to change the overall color scheme. So for example, I can change the hue and saturation to change the accent color from a green to a shade of red. Hit OK, and then all I have to do is save this PNG and apply the same changes that I just made to the 3x resolution to the 2x, 1.5x, and 1x. It would also make sense to make the same change to the anti-indicator graphics so that you have a new comprehensive updated style. Save out those PNG files, and then go back to the Bitmap Style Designer and update the graphics and replace the current green graphics with the new updated red ones. So here inside the Bitmap Style Designer, I can select Update, and then I'm going to browse to my red graphics here. Style PNG, this is my 1x resolution, and I'm going to repeat the same steps for the other resolutions. And last, the 3x resolution. As you can see, in this case, I didn't update the anti-indicator graphic, but that's something that you could easily do by performing the same steps I just showed you inside of Photoshop. I'm going to save this as my red template. Saving it out as a template will make it much easier later on if you want to make additional changes to this style. You don't have to start from scratch. You can just open the template and make the changes. And then the last step is to save this out as a style file that can be consumed by FireMonkey. So I'm going to change this to my red Android CodeRage style. Hit save. And now here I have an example project open. This is the mobile controls project. I'm going to drop a stylebook onto my form. I'm going to select Form and navigate to Stylebook, select Stylebook 1. Double click on the stylebook and then browse to the location where my red style is located and select my red Android style and hit close, apply the changes. And then you can see here now we have the red accent color throughout the different controls. And if I set this control, for example, to is checked, you can also see the red accent color here. So this is how quick and easy it was to change the overall color scheme of a style using the predefined templates, bringing them into Photoshop, quickly adjusting the hue and saturation, saving those updated graphics back out as PNGs, and then just re-importing them into the Bitmap Style Designer to create an updated look and feel. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Jim McKeith, who's going to show you how to use the new FireUI Live Preview for quickly building mobile applications and prototyping and seeing all the changes live that you're making in the IDE directly on the target devices without having to redeploy the application every time.
You see I have the Live Preview app installed on my iPad mini, and I've got the Rad Studio IDE installed. Now, first of all, I'm running it inside a virtual machine, so I have to have my virtual machine, you'll notice, is connected to the back-in-time network here, and the iPad mini is also connected to the back-in-time network. So we can check and make sure the subnet mask and IP address are there. So then inside a virtual machine here, I set it up with the network as bridged, which then actually connects the virtual machine itself, client OS, to the network directly instead of shared. So use bridge so that the IDE is publicly visible on the network. Otherwise, the iPad cannot find the IDE. And we can look at the IP address here. And we see that it is on the same subnet here So they should be able to find each other. And actually, I can ping the iPad here if I wanted to. Ping 10.0.1.15. So if you are having trouble, if you can't ping the iPad from your machine, then you're not going to be able to get there. But also, if your machine's not on the same subnet, if it's not on the bridge network, it won't work. So now that I've got everything connected correctly, I can open up Live Preview app. And it's scanning the local network. It's sending out UDP packets on the local network in order to find the IDE. If it can't find it, you can use the advanced key here, or advanced option, to provide a IP address that it will then go to and look for it there. So if it doesn't find it, or if the machine is not on the same subnet, if it's across the subnet but still accessible over TCP/IP, then you can use the advanced in order to find it. This all behaves the same as the app tethering technology. So in the IDE, there's some configuration for this. We've got options. And then down here under Form Designer, we have FireUI Live Preview. By default, this is turned on, and the server name will be your machine name. You can rename it to whatever you want to, and you can optionally provide a password. Once a device is connected, you'll see it listed here. So let's go ahead and connect. So I just select the one I want here and hit connect. So it's gone out and made a connection, and you see here it shows it as connected. So now the UI is being sent across to the iPad. Now, none of the code behind, any code that would be written like event handlers on these buttons, etc., is not sent to the iPad. There's no code execution coming across. It's just the user interface is being rendered on here. So basically, we're dynamically creating user interface. And if I make changes to this, like if I move something around, we see that it updates in near real time on the iPad. When you're done, you can either close the Live Preview app or come into Options again and select the device and right-click and say Disconnect Client, and that will disconnect it, force disconnect it.
Said if I create a non-master view, can I delete it? That's correct. If you create any view that you create besides the master, any view that you create, whether it's an iPhone view, for example, an Android view, you can delete. There's a delete button and that will delete it for you. And that's part of the FireUI Multi-Device Designer functionality.
So Pat has a big long one here, so we'll about give a second here to digest that one. With the Style Designer, will the Style Designer ever work with SVGs? Let's start with the shorter one here.
You know, that's a good question. Right now, our focus has been around bitmap styles because you can do a lot of things with bitmap styles that you can't do with SVG graphics. That being said, we do have some vector-based styles that we released several years ago. Over the last couple of years, we've really been focusing on the bitmap-based styles because they gave us really good, platform fidelity across all the different platforms that we support. But it's certainly something that we can look into. At this point, we've really been focused on the bitmap styles. If you have a specific use case, please feel free to email me. I'm always interested in hearing what kind of features the customers are looking for. And my email address is right here on the screen. And if you send me a note, I'll be sure to get back to you.
Yeah, we had a great session yesterday from Tom Grubb of Riversoft AVG showing off his SVG library.
Very cool.
Really cool stuff he's doing there. And he pointed out that it's kind of complementary to what FireMonkey does, since FireMonkey is very bitmap oriented. Let's see. After placing the style book on the form, how do I choose a style? I think you showed that in the video. Maybe you might walk through that again.
So if you have a look at... we will post a replay from the session, but if you have a look at community.embarcadero.com and you go to blogs, I actually created a blog post yesterday on the Bitmap Style Designer that also shows the process of loading a style. When you place a style book, it's a container, so you need to double click on it, and then you need to select open, and you need to browse to the location where you have the styles. So we have an actual styles folder that's installed with the product that contains a whole bunch of different styles that you can use across all the different platforms. And you would go to that and you would select that style. Now that style has some logic built into it, so it knows what platform it's intended to be run on. So if you are, for example, building an application for iOS and Android and you're looking to use custom styling, so not the default styles, you would double click, you would drag and drop a style book onto your form, double click, and then you would add your iOS style and your Android style. And in the style book collection, there's actually a field where you can define what platform it's designed to be run on. And that information is also part of the style. We have a lot of great tutorials on that. So if you go to docwiki.embarcadero.com, there is information on how to work with styles, how to work with a style book, what style book collections are all about. So I would really recommend having a look at that. But generally speaking, the quick answer is double click on the style book, select the style, and then on the form, there's a style book property. If you don't set that style book property on your form to the style book that contains the style, for example, style book 1, you won't see any changes on the form. Also, if that style is an iOS style and you're on the master and you have Windows selected, you also won't see that because it's platform specific. So it's just make sure that on the master, the drop-down that has the style selector is set to that style for the platform that you're actually trying to load. So if you want to load a custom iOS style, select iOS, double-click on your style book, load your iOS style, and then on the form, select style book 1, and you should see the custom style. And of course, some of the styles have a custom background color. Some of them don't have a custom background color, so you're going to have to put some controls. If you're working with a blank form, you're going to have to put some controls onto your form to actually see that style.
What is that? Transparent. I think that's the one I like. That's that
right,
black background.
Blue.
I love that one. That's like my default for everything.
Yeah, I've seen some cool demos that you've done with it. Yeah, we have. And I think one of the things I showed today, too, is we have a lot of style templates to get started. So whether you are using the Bitmap Style Designer, you're starting out with the style templates, or you go ahead and load an existing style, all of that can be done via the style book control that you can drop onto your form and then just set the form to style book 1, for example, if you want to use that style.
So this question here from Pat about MultiView. I'm going to let you read that one because I can answer this other question down here while you're doing that. So
okay, let me just take a second to read that.
Take a second to read that one. So there's a question here if different views can have code assigned to them or just design elements. So with the different views, anything you define in the Object Inspector can be changed between views. And so that means the event handlers can change. So if you're at the master view level and you assign an event handler, then all the children get it. But then one of the child views, one of the platform-specific views, you can change to point to a different event handler, which can change the behavior behind the code. So for example, you put down a button, and you can have it on Android. When you click the button, it could say hello Android, and you can put down the button, and then on iOS, the iOS view, change it to point to a different event handler, and that then could have a show message that says hello iOS. So you can do that. It's a little kind of weird, and it might be kind of confusing to debug, but it certainly is possible because of the fact it is doing a diff on the form, and that's anything that you can define in the Object Inspector.
Okay, so before I get back to the longer question, just to highlight again, there was another question: how do I load a style? Again, you drop the style book onto your form, you double click, and you browse to a location that contains a .style file. For example, the styles folder. You select it, hit apply, and then on the form, set it to the style book field, and you should be able to see your style. Now, there was a question about the MultiView Control, and thank you for taking the time to enter that question. I know it's a rather long question. So I think the question was regarding the pushing detail view. So that's one of the drawer options that you can select with the MultiView Control. And you said you were expecting that the MultiView would slide across by growing from the opposite side of the direction of movement. So I have to spend a bit more time looking at that question. I have used that control quite a bit, and also all the different modes. I have not seen the issue with the 1 pixel right margin that you mentioned. One of the things I would recommend doing is looking at the MultiView sample project. So if you go to 18.0 samples, Object Pascal user interface, so there's a user interface folder that has a whole bunch of UI focused samples. It has one called MultiView. If you open that project and deploy it to iOS or Android, whatever platforms you're looking to target, you should be able to try out all the different options and have a look at that and see if that addresses your question. The actual drawer option has a whole bunch of different settings that you can customize in the Object Inspector. So for MultiView, when you select the Object Inspector, you can see there's a drop down that says either platform behavior, and that will leverage all the built-in behaviors that we have as part of FireMonkey behavior services that we have built into that control. So we have customized that control to behave a certain way if it's run on a tablet form factor versus a phone, whether it's run in landscape mode or portrait mode, etc. So we have all of that built in as part of behavior services. And then, of course, you can also customize that and say, look, I always want my MultiView to be shown as a slide and drawer, for example. Then that mode has its own settings that are accessible via the object inspector so that you can fully customize the way that that control looks. So I would recommend having a look at that. If you're running into any challenges, select that control and customize it using the properties that are exposed via the object inspector. Now, Pat, if you have additional questions on that, please feel free to send me a sample project. Again, my email address is on the screen here, and I'm more than happy to have a look at that and check for you.
So here's a question saying that goes to Tool, Bitmap Tile Designer, and gets an error that it doesn't exist in that folder. It says using C++ Builder Professional.
I'm not familiar with that being a problem. I haven't heard that. So it should be in your bin directory. Also, you should be able to go to the bin directory and find bitmap styledesigner.exe right within the bin directory if you can't open it from the tools menu. So I would recommend going to it. It should be there. If you don't see it, I would recommend maybe reinstalling the product, but it should be there.
It's just bitmap styledesigner.exe, right?
I think that's it. Mm-hmm.
I notice your path is different, and so
yeah, the path looks different than what I'm used to seeing.
Yeah, so it might be that it's in the.
It should be under Studio 18.0, not Studio/CPP Builder. I think it's Studio 18.0.
Right, so you might go look in Studio and see if there's another directory off Studio that's Studio 18.0.
And then in the bin
and
directory.
then see if it's in there. And if it is, then you just need to update it in the Tools menu. There's a customize tools, I think.
Right,
option.
There's an option for customizing tools. Yeah, it's possible that your tools menu for Bitmap Style Designer is pointing to a different location, or that maybe something got changed on your system.
Yep, it could have been maybe reinstalled in a different location and the registry didn't get updated. There's a question. Is there a way to view the differences that were made for an alternate view?
It depends. If you are the UI differences, no. I mean, besides actually looking at the view itself.
Now you can open the file. Can't
that's
you?
right. You could look at the file itself, and you could have a look at it there. That would probably be your best bet. Otherwise, if you're looking at the view visually, you can see the differences just by seeing, for example, if you're changing the visibility to false of a control, you'd be able to see that, and then you could look at the form file itself.
I love the FireUI, this ability to do these different views for different platforms, because it gives you that ability to make the one UI that's going to work, pretty good on all platforms, but then to give it those little tweaks you need just to make it perfect on every platform.
And that's really something I think, and hopefully that was clear during my presentation, which is if you're creating an application for multiple platforms, try to lay it out as much as possible on the master, because that really will save you a lot of time. Then create views for each platform that you're looking to target. And then if you're looking to have a different UI, for example, on an iOS phone versus an iOS tablet, so an iPhone or an iPad, then create views for those specific form factors. And then if you have too many UI elements and they don't all fit on your phone form factor, just set the visibility to false. And that allows you to really spend the majority of your time laying out your application on the master and then just tweaking it as needed, rather than going into each view and having to spend a lot of time customizing the UI there.
Yeah, and for those that aren't familiar, on Apple and Android tools, they actually encourage you to build entirely new views for each platform. And that's way too much work to maintain separate views. So this is a huge, much better than the other options. There's a question here. Is there a style book marketplace?
We don't currently have a style book marketplace. We do have some premium styles that have been part of a bonus pack offer in the past. And those are premium styles that are different UI themes for all the different 4 platforms that we support today that are available as part of the premium style pack, but we don't currently have a separate marketplace for them. But that's a great idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Put it in maybe Get It or something like that. So you can go and buy styles. That could be cool. Phil saying, Phil, we will have replays available later. Probably, so we do have some of the replays up already right now. My sons are in the other room editing away and uploading them to YouTube. But these today, I think we're going to have a separate playlist because they're for update subscription customers only, at least for at first. So stay tuned. Look towards your email to see what happens. They might show up in the playlist or not. I've not been informed what the final decision is. But yes, it will be available later. If you create a custom style and place that style book on separate apps, and then in the future you update the custom style, it should automatically update all the apps where the custom style set to style book is, or not.
Well, you can set a style for the project, but if you have multiple apps, multiple projects, you're going to have to update. You're going to have to reload that style in your project, and then just rebuild the application. Hit build and target the application. One of the things you can do is actually build in support for multiple styles within your application. And if you go to my blog on community.embarcadero.com, I did a blog post, I think it was a while back, but that showed you how to basically add a style selector to your application. So that's something very popular. For example, you could have a settings panel within your iOS or Android application where the customer could choose between a light style or a dark style. And that's something that you can do right within your application.
And I will again point out that on most Android apps, I think Android apps, if you do that, you have to restart the app.
Right.
But with style books, boop, it does it immediately.
That's right.
It's like magic.
It is like magic.
Okay, Live Preview on my iPad does not show styles that are applied to the form background style was applied. It does not display radiant shapes either. Okay, so radiant shapes, there is a guide to how you need to update the Live Preview app because it does not include the radiant shapes, so it's not able to show them.
I'll have to check on your second question. I don't recall 100% whether styles beyond the default styles are supported. I think they are, and they're supposed to work, but I'm not 100% sure.
I think it was just the OS styles.
Yeah, I think it's just the operating system styles, the default built-in styles, not the custom ones. But to be honest, I need to double check on that.
Yeah, you might, if that is the case, you might need to rebuild them with those in it.
Right.
Rebuild it. So there is a guide to that, and actually, the people that make Tchart, it starts Stima. They have a guide on how to rebuild the Live Preview with the updated Stima or the updated Tchart controls, Tchart Pro controls, so that you can get those in Live Preview. So it's pretty easy. Actually, I went through and did it at one point too. I can't remember if I did a skill sprint on it. Or, anyway, it's not that complicated. Just got to walk through the steps to add those in there, and it should show them. What's the path for the styles folder?
I think it's public user documents and then Rad Studio. Public documents. I think it's under the public.
I will go look. I have a Rad Studio right over here real quick, and then Sarina can entertain you with a funny story.
All right. Well, I'll look at the questions again and see. Let me see here. After placing a style book on my form, how do I choose the style? I think that was already answered, but you can just go in and double click on a style book and load your style, and then you can set which platforms you want to support. So that's an important thing, again, just to highlight. If you're loading a style in, make sure the style setting on the master matches the actual style that you're loading. So if it's iOS, that it's an actual iOS style versus a Windows style. And Jim, it looks like you've already tracked down the location of the styles folder.
I do. I have a bookmark for it because I'm using it so much. It is in /users public documents Embarcadero /studio /18.0/styles. So that's users public documents /Embarcadero /studio /18.0/styles. And actually, I guess it's users /public /documents, not users public documents, but Explorer calls it that. So, yep, that's where it's at.
So, and then I saw this a follow-up question regarding the third-party components and the Live Preview app. I'm sure that Jim can track down a link to, I think it's on the Stima website, Jim.
Oh, here, Vladimir just shared the link for the path forth. I just...
Thank you, Vladimir.
Knocked Sarina over with hunting it down.
That's all right.
There's a video that shows loading a style.
Yes, we have, I think, a whole bunch of videos that show you how to load a style. If you go to youtube.com/Embarcadero TechNet, that is our YouTube channel, and Jim, again, will track down a link for us and paste it in the chat pane here, and Embarcadero TechNet, and if you do a search for styles, you should be able to find a whole bunch of styles. and how to actually, you should find a bunch of videos that show you how to load a custom style.
Here, I'll play this video for you while I'm loading that one. All right, and here's a link for how to load a style. And then we'll stop that one so you don't watch the next video on, I didn't send it. Send it. There we go.
All right, great.
Android environments seem to restrict the size of text form being below 32. How can I get beyond these restrictions to produce small text in edit boxes? I don't know.
Restrict the size of text from being below 32? Do you mean they're restricting it to a smaller size? I mean, one of the things you can do, so with all of the controls, we have built in the expected font and font size and font attributes for each target platforms, and that's part of the actual style. So one of the things you could do is you could customize that style. So you can go into your text settings for each control and you can set it to a higher font if you wanted to. You can also right click on that control and select edit custom style, and then within the integrated style designer you can change the settings for that control. So that should allow you to override whatever the defaults are that you're trying to override, if I understand your question correctly.
I think also, isn't there someplace that you can specify whether or not the font size comes from the style or not?
Yeah, that's all done by setting the style lookup property.
Yep.
So for example, for T-Edit, it has a built-in style lookup property. If you have that set for all the different controls, it will use the expected font size and font attribute on that target platform. If you want to overwrite that, you can not set a property for it. And you can go to the text settings and customize it there, or right-click on your control and select Edit Default Style or Edit Custom Style. We have detailed documentation on that.
And it looks like it's top of the hour, actually, so we need to let Sarina go.
All right.
Thank you so much, Sarina.
Yeah, thanks very much for all the great questions. And again, if you have any other follow-up questions, or especially the person that sent in the great question about the MultiView Control, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, anyone on this call, if you have any follow-up questions on the style, and I'll be happy to get back to you.
Yep, Sarina's email's up on the screen right now. All right, thank you so much, Sarina, for
thank you.
Your presentation and for all you do to make Delphi and C++ Builder so awesome.
Oh, thank you very much, and thanks a lot for everybody for joining and for all the great questions today.